DiscerningHearts.com presents Inside the Pages, insights from today's most compelling authors. I'm your host, Kris McGregor, and I am delighted to be joined by Michael Novak, who is a distinguished visiting professor at Ave Maria University in Florida, after 32 years in the chair in Religion and Public Policy at the American Enterprise Institute in Washington, D.C. He was the 1994 recipient of the Templeton Prize and was on 3 occasions U.S. Ambassador under Ronald Reagan. With Michael Novak, we go inside the pages of Social Justice Isn't What You Think It Is, published by Encounter Books. What is social justice? For Friedrich Hayek, it was a mirage, a meaningless, ideological, incoherent, vacuous cliché. He believed the term should be avoided, abandoned, and allowed to die a natural death. For its proponents, social justice is a catch-all term that can be used to justify any progressive-sounding government program. It endures because it venerates its champions and brands its opponents as supporters of social injustice, and thus as enemies of humankind. As an ideological marker, social justice always works best when it is not too sharply defined. In Social Justice Isn't What You Think It Is, Michael Novak and Paul Adams seek to clarify the true meaning of social justice and to rescue it from its ideological captors. In examining figures ranging from Antonio Rosamini, Abraham Lincoln, and Friedrich Hayek to Popes Leo XIII, John Paul II, and Francis, the authors reveal that social justice is not a synonym for progressive government, as we have come to believe. Rather, it is a virtue, rooted in Catholic social teaching and developed as the alternative to the unchecked power of the state. Almost all social workers set themselves as progressives, not conservatives. Yet many of their best practices aim to empower families and local governments. They stress not individual or state, but the vast social space between them. Left and right surprisingly meet. In this surprising reintroduction of its original intent, social justice represents an immensely powerful virtue for nurturing personal responsibility and building the human communities that can encounter the widespread surrender to an ever-growing state. We now begin part 2 of our discussion with Michael Novak. In that experience of caritas, that experience of love, it seems as though the society, have we gotten so big, Michael, that we don't trust anymore the ability of a family to love properly. So that is why we turn to governmental institutions to impose caritas.
Well, you're right. And I agree with that, but I think one reason for that was not so much losing trust in family as deliberately despising the family. There has been a huge campaign led by socialism and Marxism, but spread far beyond their ranks into liberal society, attacking the family, that it's not important. The most important thing is sexual expression. And that's the only thing that really counts. If you want to know where the left is today, it doesn't fight so much on economic issues, on foreign policy issues somewhat, but the real issues on which it's really stubborn are sexual issues. They're absolutely intent on getting people to approve of abortion, to approve of homosexual conduct and homosexual unions, to depreciate male-female marriage, the traditional understanding of the family, to cut those down. And in essence, I hate to be so raw, but as one scholar put it, it comes down now to the right of each individual person to use his or her sexual organs as he or she wants, wherever, whenever, and with whomever they are moved. And this is a guaranteed destruction of a civilization. People don't see it that way. They wouldn't propose it if they did. But that's what human experience suggests is right about history. So anyway, it's a big argument, and that's where the lines have been drawn around the family. And social justice is a beginning point for the family, and for the family to turn its attention outside its own borders, to help spread small little associations of hope and opportunity and growth, and care for one another. That's the Christian vision, and these can become very large. They can become international. After all, that's what the Christian church is. The Catholic Church is the first global institution. That's what it means to be Catholic. Go teach the gospel to all nations, not just some, not some of one race, but of all races, in all parts of the globe. And so the Catholic Church is a huge global missionary society. So it's huge. I mean, millions strong. It's the largest religious group in the world, growing really rapidly in Africa and in Asia. Very rapid progress, some observers say, in China. Hard to get reliable numbers out. But, it wouldn't surprise me from what I read to learn that China became one of the biggest Catholic populations in the world. Not everybody in China, but, a couple 100 million maybe. And we're well on our way to that, because communism left the soul empty, and there's a huge vacuum to fill. And Christianity makes the most sense of the family and of evil and suffering and so many of the realities of life that rosier views of life don't provide. Don't have. One problem with secularism is it does not prepare people for suffering and death. And if I understand it correctly, empirical studies all over the world show that religious people, particularly Christian and Jewish people, suffer pain better, more nobly, more patiently, and have better prognosis of good health. It's just amazing how life teaches us what's right and true.
We're talking with Michael Novak about the book Social Justice Isn't What You Think It Is. He co-wrote it with Paul Adams. And Michael, the book is extraordinary in its sheer depth of the subject. I mean, the whole section where you have the 16 principles of Catholic social thought, I would hope that every Catholic family, if you did not ever even experience this in your education, that you would bring it into your homes and have it as discussion.
Yeah, they couldn't have experienced it in their education because a lot of it was uncovered, several of the 16 principles, 3 or 4, by Pope John Paul II and Pope Benedict. So they're recent articulations of old ideas, but they're in the spirit of Leo XIII, finding a new language to depict the real depth of Catholic faith. And, they haven't been very conscious for people before. Social justice isn't the only principle. It's one very important one, but there are 15 others. And I don't know of anywhere else they're listed as I have them in the book. And they're based right on texts right out of the popes. So, or obviously out of the New Testament, more obviously out of the New Testament. And even the ones from the popes don't make any sense. They don't have any power except what comes from the New Testament. Well, so there's a lot there.
There certainly is. And I think the thing that we may struggle with because of our lack of formation in this area, at least in a greater scope, is that when we hear terms, especially on through mass media, whether it's on television, the internet, radio, wherever it is, we have a tendency to fall into kind of traps of allowing commentators to moderate the discussion as opposed to allowing the church to moderate the discussion. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't exactly like the church to moderate it, but what I would like is a lot more Christians who are of deep faith and deep learning working in the mass media and raising questions that others won't, and being skeptical about secular things where others aren't, and being deep about religious things in a way that other people have not learned to be. So they would constantly be expanding the discussion in many different directions and generate a little space for wisdom and growth in the public sphere. As it is now, there's a certain secular religion which dominates the public sphere. And those who speak in favor of there not being any God, or Christian values being out of date, or traditional values being passé, get the best hearing. Mm-hmm. And others who object to those hardly ever get a hearing. You know, when's the last time you heard a real debate on abortion? Why some people find it wrong and just hideous? Why? And why other people find it a virtue and to be encouraged, at least not to be taken as anything very serious. You know, you get these little ads all the time. I'm happy I had my abortion. As if you get up and walk away from it. Now, other people can't do that. They have a different moral code and a different sense of the value of a human life and a human person. But you never hear that debate on television. You never get lined up. College kids don't hear it. It's just two groups shouting across the ocean at one another. It's, you know, it doesn't have to be that way. But the mass media are so monolithic, we don't get, you know, Christian voices don't get their fair share, and it's our fault. We don't make ourselves, we're a majority, and we don't make ourselves get a full share. We're content to be a silent, not majority, but a silent big minority. And it's not right.
I think in some cases it may be the intimidation of the subject matter, because when we think of social justice, what's going on with the dignity of the individual or the particular principles, which I think are so important to outline, the debate becomes more about, well, how are you going to deal with the issue of the poor? And if somehow you are not seeming to appear to support that greater general overview of the poor, that you're a domineering capitalist or you're a taker. I'm not even sure how to articulate it clearly, Michael.
Well, that's the impression we're given every day. But honestly, think about the reality. How did most of our families in America, all my friends and relatives, practically everybody I know and I've met across the country, can trace back in their family 3 generations ago when the family was poor. Sometimes less than that. Really poor. And didn't have an education, didn't have capital, didn't have savings, and had jobs that paid so little. And, well, how did they come out of that? Most of us are not poor today. The people I'm thinking of, 85% of the American people are not poor. How did they get out of poverty? And they were in 1900. How did they get? Well, mostly through small jobs. Barber shops, gas stations, auto dealerships, franchisees, and so forth. People get out of poverty by working. And better than that is by owning. Small businesses are the best road. Something like 80% of the American people, may not be quite that high today, but it's almost, work in small businesses, firms employing under 15 or 20 people. You're not going to get out of poverty if you don't have good jobs. So I think the creation of jobs is one of the greatest acts we can do for the poor. And I say small business is the best hope of social justice around the world. The poor are not going to be lifted out of poverty by the state. The state doesn't have any money except what it confiscates from others. And they're not going to be lifted out of their poverty by huge corporations because there aren't enough huge corporations. They don't employ very many people altogether. The Fortune 500 and the corporations of that size or bigger employ about 13 to 14 million people at their height, and maybe more, like 11 million today. It's not that they're becoming poorer, those corporations. They're just investing in better technologies. And they're able to do things with much less manpower than they used to have. And so we have many more goods without so many people doing these routine manufacturing jobs. They pay very well, but they're not always the best for learning and human development. In that, nothing beats small business. So, I think the formation of new small businesses, which puts 80-85% of the American people to work, is the great key. And it's also the key in Argentina. It's the key in every Chile. It's the key in every country on earth. Kenya, you name it. Small business, and that's how China and India in the last 30 years have pulled more than 500 million, some 600 million people out of poverty by creating millions of small businesses, or not creating them, but allowing them to form. The talents for doing that are there in the people. Just allow them to blossom. Don't prevent them from blossoming. Don't kill them. And they'll flourish. And, so there are things we can do. But people talk about the evils of capitalism. They don't think about small business and the creation of jobs. And that's where the action is.
Well, it's that goes back to those fundamental principles, the dignity of each human person, the importance of the family to train them to be good citizens, that subsidiarity.
And be creative. And to have good ideas and think of new ideas that aren't being... Well, what business is lacking in your town or your village or your city that you have the wit to provide if you put your mind to it? We used to say... we lived in Long Island in a small village, and a new bakery moved in. They got their fresh bakery goods from Brooklyn or Queens every day, and cheesecake and things like that, and really good bread. And my wife and I used to say our standard of living jumped 10% just with the arrival of that bakery. And it's true in a lot of neighborhoods. Certain kinds of businesses add a life and a vitality and a joy. Even Starbucks and companies like that, artificial franchises or whatever, they still provide little islands where people would love to go and sip coffee and have a roll or something and read the paper and work on their computers. And to be with people while they're doing things that otherwise would be lonely. Even things like that have improved neighborhoods and parts of cities. I'm babbling again, but I think you get the picture. It's these small little things that improve life for families and the roots of society. And when those are strong, and when children learn these good habits of how to be creative, be like God, create new businesses, be economically creative, be artistically creative, be religiously creative, be like God, be a creator. That comes to the family. And, German families, for instance, all across the Midwest, built their homes around pianos or violins. Or the musical tradition is terrific, much better than other ethnic groups, much better than other cultures. And out of that have come a great many good and important American musicians. So teaching, even passing on creativity goes through families. Passing on good learning habits goes through families. The older you get, and I'm 82 now, the older you get, the more you see how much you owe to your parents. Practically everything you do or think or have ambitions for or aspire to, you can trace back to something your mother or father did or said. It's quite amazing.
Oh, now here we're back to the value of the human person, the way their dignity, and allowing the gifts, the Creator. We're created in His image. We're created to create and to use the gifts He gives us to benefit not only that family, but that society.
One thing was not developed very highly in Catholic thought was to be economically creative, that is, to be entrepreneurs. Show initiative, take risk, put your savings into something risky. And by the way, 4 out of every 7 new small businesses fails. So you got to be prepared to pick yourself up and try it again, learn from your failures, and do better next time. That's what most people do. Well, anyway, Christianity does not promise us a rose garden. It promises us suffering and hard work and discipline. It's such an honest religion. That's what I find it's most, holds up that cross in front of us all day and every day. And you think, if this is what God inflicted on his Son, what right have we to get off more lightly? And so to be grateful and so to understand the realities of life, that there's going to be suffering, and to keep plugging ahead anyway, be creative anyway. And that's such an empowering idea that Christianity has spread. And it's why freedom grows mostly in Christian countries. And different kinds of freedom, economic and political and personal and creative. Because we have that in Jewish culture too, that the role of human beings is to be like God, to be creative. And the creation really works only through suffering and hardship. And you have to learn how to endure those and form habits that help you to endure those and get back up again. I think one of the saints said, becoming a saint doesn't mean you entirely stop sinning, but it does mean that your sins become less frequent and much easier to correct and to recover from and to begin to repent of and correct. We're always weak and sinful creatures, but we do learn to get up more quickly and to move on. And okay, I'm again babbling too much, but you get it. It is all about the human person, the dignity of the human person. That's what makes us gives us dignity, is that we are empowered by God to be like God, and we have to take responsibility for doing that. That's human dignity, to exercise responsibility, to understand that there are things we ought to do, and to begin to learn how to do them and how to train ourselves to do them.
Michael, do you think that, for the human person, for the Christian in particular, we have this great gift as well of hope. Hope that is because we do love and care for one another, by protecting that person's dignity and to be able to have that expression. That's where the charity comes in, is to, I'm thinking of the manager. You have the two types of managers. You can either be a Scrooge, or you can be a Fezziwig. You can be that manager who he cares for his employees. He runs a business. He may not, it may not always be successful, but he's remembered and lifted up as the example of the good man, as opposed to the one who is just... Yeah,
he cherished his help and helped them to grow, helped them be better persons. That's irreplaceable. There's no price can be put on it.
If you could, Michael, in your book, Social Justice isn't what you think it is. You help us to recall the teachings of the incredible popes we've had, particularly since Pope Leo XIII, to our present time. And when I speak of the present time, it has become a challenge for many, the expression of Pope Francis. Help us to understand, because his particular approach, his mindset, maybe we're so close to it, we are not able to see it as clearly as we could because of media interpretation.
Well, the Church, the people of God, have always put great value on Leo the 13th, and we owe Catholic social teaching. It was led by the popes, beginning with Leo the 13th in 1891, and so much as the church valued this that every few years, like Quadragesimo Anno was the first. Quadragesimo means the 40th anniversary. It's in Latin, the 40th anniversary of Rerum Novarum. And Pius XI wrote a powerful letter increasing what the church had learned in the preceding 40 years about social justice. Not all of it quite right, but all of it in advance. And then later popes in Octogesimo Anno, the 80th anniversary, and the 90th anniversary, and the 100th anniversary, Centesimus Anno, popes reflected again on what we've learned. When you're dealing with social policy and economic policy, the human race learns a lot by experience. It learns what doesn't work. And the church has kept celebrating these and learning more from decade to decade. So that's why we go through a whole series of posts, Paul and I, in social justice and what you think. I'm tempted to borrow a line from Peggy Noonan. She's been pushing her new book, and I heard her say on the radio the other day, do yourself a favor, make yourself happy, buy this book. I thought, yeah, that's a good motto.
Yeah, I think
increase your knowledge so that when you hear a word like that, you feel like you understand it better than anybody else, and that's a nice feeling.
I think that's an extraordinary, wise counsel here. Michael, I wish we had more time. Any final thoughts?
Well, we tried to make the book as vivid and as much fun to read as we could. It's a pretty heavy book, I've got to admit that, because we had a lot of arguments to meet, a lot of people who disagree with us. So we had to build it like a battleship to take incoming fire. But I think it's prepared for that. It's a pretty well reasoned and lots of powerful examples in it. So we're making steady progress, and intellectually, and we may be learning these things too late, and we may be losing the battle temporarily with secularism. But secularism is not going to work. It's going to peter out. It's futile and it's evil, just like what Pope Leo said about socialism, and he turned out to be right. So I think we have a good chance of turning out to be right.
Michael Novak, thank you so very, very much.
Thank you so much, and such good questions, too, especially staying down to earth. I really appreciate that.
God bless.
God bless you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. With Michael Novak, we've gone inside the pages of Social Justice Isn't What You Think It Is. To learn more about this book or to obtain a copy, go to encounterbooks.com, the website for its publisher, Encounter Books, or you can find it at any fine Catholic bookstore. To hear and or to download this discussion along with many others, go to discerninghearts.com. This has been a production of discerninghearts.com. I'm your host, Kris McGregor. Join us next time for Inside the Pages, insights from today's most compelling authors.